Tonight on Top Gear, Sertorius cosplays as an Iberian. Gaius Marius marries his own reflection. And a tribune of the plebs has a bad night. Welcome back to the life of Sertorius, Rome's truly underrated gem. So after the brutal loss at Arusio, Sertorius joined the army of Gaius Marius. You might know Marius from his reforms, his record number of consulships, and his famous cookbook. Anyway, this small event of joining an army of a Roman general would lead to a profound effect on Sertorius' remaining life. He would then volunteer to be a spy, to learn valuable information from the Cimbri. Just as the devastating defeat at Arusio was likely a watershed moment for Sertorius' perspective of the world, so was his time spent with the Cimbri. We aren't given a specific time he spent as an undercover spy, but it could have been as long as 2 to 3 years with a foreign army, learning the language, the customs, and getting to personally know non-Romans, especially a people which Rome considered barbarians. To this level was something very few other Romans of his day would have done. Romans were pretty renowned for their arrogance, seeing their culture as superior and nearly all others as meritless. Their arrogance obviously affected their ability to work with non-Romans. This opening of Sertorius' worldview certainly had a direct effect on his ability to work with the native Iberians later in his lifetime. After Arusio, the Cimbri went into Iberia to ravage some new land. So while Sertorius is off drinking martinis, shaken, not stirred, and smoozing with the Cambrian women as a secret agent, let's change focus to a man who forever changed Sertorius' life, Gaius Marius. The beginnings of his life was quite similar to Sertorius, distinguishing himself as a soldier and being quite a rough orator. He was a populist, and this hurt his support among the upper class, but he was eventually able to secure a position of propraetor, a Roman governor of Hispania. Hispania and Iberia were names of what is modern-day Spain, Portugal, and parts of France. As we'll get into later, the Romans were pretty brutal in Hispania, most governors using it as a playground to gain glory and wealth. So when Marius came in and did the bare minimum of good governance, he was very well received by the Iberian people there, which would help Sertorius gain support when he would later fight there under the banner of Marius. After this, he would fight Jugurtha in Numidia under Metellus Pius, who attempted to sabotage Marius' political career after Marius attempted to win over the Roman army to himself. This sabotage wouldn't work on the determined Gaius, who won the consulship despite being hamstrung by Metellus. He did this by promising to end the Jugurthian War within a year. And ending wars successfully was pretty much Roman political gold. Although he had a little trick up his sleeve. He knew Metellus had pretty much all but won the war and glory. He indeed kept this promise and captured Jugurtha and bringing the Roman soldiers home. But it was actually Cornelius Sulla who masterminded and executed the capture of the Numidian king. So while Marius stole the glory from Metellus, Sulla stole a bit back from Marius. Yay, a personal rivalry that would tear Rome apart. His incredible popularity with the people got him elected for a second consulship just a few years after his first, despite there being a need for 10 years in between consulships. Yay, the erosion of constitutional norms! He would use the next 5 consecutive consulships to reform the military to help swell the ranks after the serious losses from the Cimbri. I can literally hear some of you groaning after spending this much time on someone not named Sertorius in a video series about Sertorius. But you can't understand Sertorius' life without the context it existed in, and no one had more of an impact on that than Marius. And speaking of our man Sertorius, after the Cimbri had a rough go in Iberia, they looked back at attacking the Italian peninsula. And coincidentally, this is where historians believe they also ran out of martinis at this time, causing Sertorius to return back to the army of Marius, along with valuable intel. In 2 upcoming battles, it is likely Sertorius was present in the fighting, although any role or even his involvement is unknown. Unfortunately, fighting against the powers that be in Rome later in his life meant much of his life's records were either not kept or purged by his enemies. So we do have to do some guesstimating when it comes to putting together his life story. When the Cimbri went into Iberia, they split from other Germanic tribes, and it was these other tribes that Marius would deal with first. A brilliant general, Marius orchestrated a crushing defeat, killing or capturing 100,000 enemies of Rome. Next was to focus on the Cambrian threat, moving into Italia. Alongside the armies of the other consul, Catulus, they did battle with the Cimbri. Although due to battlefield confusion, most of the actual fighting of the battle was done by Catulus' men. The battle was also successfully won by the intervention of the Roman cavalry, led by, you guessed it, Sulla. Well, at least Marius was renowned for his ability to share credit and glory. Wait, what? You're telling me he was actually terrible at it? and that his selfishness for glory was a contributing factor to the late Republic's ills and the source of an upcoming rant of mine? Oh, duly noted. Returning victoriously from battle, Marius and Sertorius entered Rome to reap the benefits of saving the city. Although this was short-lived due to Marius being despised by the Optimates and his own political missteps. Metellus, the commander Marius had stolen glory from, had been driven in exile by Marius years before, but now the Senate recalled him back to the city. Instead of seeing his rival return, Marius left the city for Asia Minor, and Sertorius went to Hispania as a military tribune. Up to this point, Sertorius served exclusively under other commanders, particularly Marius, so this will be his first time he can really act on his own, and we can see how he tackles situations. The answer can be summed up in one word: decisively. His provincial commander sent him to the town of Castello to deal with an issue that was moving towards a boiling point, whether they knew it or not. Surrounded by abundance and perceived security, the Roman legionnaires of the garrison had lost discipline, spending much of their days getting drunk. Drunk guys with gladiuses? Yeah, it's a bad combo. The locals noticed this breakdown in discipline and decided it was time to get rid of the intoxicated interlopers and invited a neighboring town to help with the surprise attack. As the Romans' day drinking continued into the night, they were attacked en masse by the town and their neighbors. Philip Matyszak makes the point: the troops were not quartered in the actual homes of the townfolk, for had they been so quartered, most of them would have been hung and drawn as well. You know, I don't see a lot of antiquarian wordplay, so I have to make it known when I see it. Anyways, Sertorius gathered the garrison outside of the city and restored order the Roman way, swiftly and brutally. After securing all the exits, they fought to retake the town and killed every military-aged male, involved in the uprising or not. After the town was suppressed, Sertorius brought his men to the neighboring town who had helped perpetrate the attack on the Romans. Dressed in the armor of the Iberians they had killed, they were welcomed back into the town, only to continue their bloody revenge. Anyone who wasn't killed outright was taken as a slave. Deceit, violence, and razing of whole towns was employed by both sides across the Iberian Peninsula, and Sertorius had proven he could meet the standards of the region. Plutarch would say Sertorius' handling of the situation in Castello would make him highly renowned in Hispania, and was likely a factor of having an uneventful tribuneship after the event. But the renown would not stop in just Iberia, but would extend to the city of Rome as well. With his actions in Hispania and his association with Marius, Sertorius was able to become quaestor, the lowest level of the Roman Senate, but it did make him a senator. Not bad for the roughest and readiest orator in Rome. Good thing he's coming back into politics just as the dangerous situation in Rome began to cease. Just kidding, it's social war time. So Roman citizenship was a massive carrot the Romans used throughout their history. In the beginning, it was given to anyone who was willing and some Italians who weren't. In the imperial era, it was granted those who served many years in the legions. It afforded many rights and legal protections, ability to vote in Roman elections, as well as when serving in the legions, they would be treated as fellow Romans rather than auxiliary. So it was a big deal. But as Rome grew, they became much more frugal when it came to dishing out citizenship. Rome's aristocracy could take advantage of non-Roman Italian farmers, knowing they would not be able to get vindication in the Roman courts, and thus fought vigorously to oppose the granting of citizenship to the Italians. Livius Drusus, a tribune of the plebs, took up the cause for citizenship and fought for the Italians. His reforms were ultimately rejected by the aristocracy and the Senate, and in 91 BC, he was assassinated in his own home. Okay, let's stop really quick before everything hits the fan, just to really focus on the deterioration of the Roman constitutional norms at this point. Men like Julius Caesar and Augustus got a lot of the blame for the end of the Republic, but the foundations of the Roman Republic were already being eroded a lifetime before the empire's rise. A tribune of the plebs was sacrosanct. Assaulting one was a death penalty offense, and Drusus was murdered in his own home. No one was ever charged, and one of the suspects of his murder set up a special court, not to find the killer that had committed an affront to the Roman pantheon, but to prosecute Drusus' supporters. Back to Sertorius. A quaestor in the provinces typically ran logistics for the legions there, and worked closely with the proconsul, the Roman governor, who was a senior senator. But as with everything Sertorius was involved in, it wasn't typical. The governor was taking a hands-on approach at cleaning up the mess the Cambri had left in person, leaving Sertorius to run the province of Cisalpine Gaul, the part of Gaul on the Italian side of the Alps. With a massive civil war erupt in Italy, being the province closest to the Italian peninsula, Sertorius was suddenly in the spotlight. Most legionaries and soldiers came from Italy and Cisalpine Gaul, and now that much of Italy was in revolt, Sertorius had to step up the recruitment in Gaul as well as extracting resources for the war effort. Normally, this wouldn't be too hard, but in this situation, it was like playing a game of giant Jenga on a tightrope over a pool of sharks. A very delicate touch was required. If he dragged his feet, Rome could really lose the civil war. If he was too forceful with recruitment, he could push the provincials to join the Italians in the uprising. All of this from a population who weren't even the biggest fans of Rome to start with. He had to strike a balance with very little room for error. He didn't know it yet, but this would be the perfect training for his time in Iberia, raising manpower from a reluctant population that if pushed over the edge would go over to his enemy. He did this excellently, better than any of the other provincial governors in the Roman Republic, and he was just a lowly questor. Looking at his life in hindsight, it really is incredible how nearly every step of it prepared him for his eventual guerrilla governorship in Iberia. At the age of 35, before even fighting in the social war, he had been a spy among barbarians, allied himself with a man who was among the most respected Romans by the Iberians, practically ran a province, and extracted recruits from a reluctant ally. Sertorius was indomitable, prudent, and personally courageous, traits he was undoubtedly born with. But his life trajectory taught him every lesson he would need to learn before becoming the rogue general in Hispania, fighting as the last remnant of the Popularis faction in the era of Marius before the era of Caesar. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. Next episode we'll get more into the social war, where Sertorius would lose an eye in the fighting, followed by Sulla's civil war, where Sertorius could really start making waves in history. As always, thank you to Dr. Philip Matyszak and his book Sertorius and the Struggle for Spain, which is my primary reference. Highly recommend it if you'd like to know more about Sertorius, or just if you're not willing to wait for me to make more Sertorius videos. I won't take it personally. Feel free to comment below with what you liked and what you didn't like. I'm pretty new to this, so feedback is very much appreciated. If you want to continue hearing the story of Sertorius, subscribe. So now, be like Sertorius and
crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women. That is good.